We have done three of the four sessions of the People Power event already. I think it's been a really interesting day. I always like sort of being part of these. I like being presenting in some of them, but I always find that I learn loads when I'm in these sessions as well. So hopefully those of you that have been with us for the long haul today have already found the same. And those of you that are joining us now, I hope this final session will be just as juicy. So Ben, if you can go to the next slide, we'll talk through who's here with us today. We'll move across from left to right. As you might be sick of hearing mine and Ben's voice at this point, but I'm Iona and I'm managing director here at Ajurio. I'll be leading the session, and at the end of it, I'll be reflecting on some of the things that we've learned across the course of the whole day for us to take away. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, me again. Yeah, I am Insights Lead at Ajurio. For anyone who hasn't been in the previous sessions, I work with our national data sets and we'll share some of our insights in today's session of the national picture when it comes to retention.
And Hannah.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Wilson. I'm the founder and director of a DEIB training provider called The Belonging Effect. We used to be called Diverse Educators. And prior to that, I was an executive head teacher and I've also been a chair of a MAT board.
Lovely. And last but not least, Sufyan.
Okay, I've got to check. Can you hear me first?
Yes.
Perfect. My name is Sufyan Sadiq. I'm a director at Chiltern Learning Trust and involved in a number of charitable organizations and like to push and promote as much as I can about racial equity.
Excellent. Yeah, thrilled to have the two of you and of course Ben here with us today. So the subject of today is around retention, but we sort of started this. We started creating this session thinking, yeah, this is a conversation around retention, and then the more that we looked at it, the more it was clear. And I don't want to steal Ben's thunder. He's gonna show you some data as proof in a moment, but the more it was clear that the things that relate to belonging are the things that, and culture and sort of how staff feel have a much stronger relationship with retention than some of the other factors. So we've kind of elevated the belonging side of this conversation with that in mind. We will talk about retention overall, and we're going to talk at looking at the experience of staff between different roles. Ben's actually going to be showing you some data that you've already seen this morning, but looking at it through a slightly different lens this time around. And then we're going to hand over to Sufyan, who's going to talk through the approach at Chiltern Learning Trust to date. There's kind of everything around retention around the culture and the sort of sense of belonging within the trust, but there's some really interesting stuff that Chiltern are doing around recruitment. And I know we started the day with a session on recruitment, but I think recruitment and retention do really go hand in hand. So it would be remiss not to hear around some of the cool stuff that Chiltern have done to build their workforce as well. And then we'll hand over to Hannah, who, as mentioned, runs the Belonging Effect. Belonging is in the name. Hannah's also recently published a book on the subject, and so she'll be finishing up with some sort of good ideas and good practice around improving belonging in the workplace. So, Ben, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to start with a big stat, which is the whole workforce. What is the percentage of school staff that are at risk of resigning? So the good news is that what we saw in last year's data was a slight improvement in risk of resignation. So we actually saw that it dipped from 43%, which we had seen the 2 years prior, down to 41%. But that is still high. That means that 41% of staff within our workforce are considering resigning, and within the academic year for 2024-2025. The differences between roles and how that looks is quite different. So the picture is very different when we look at it by those roles that we've seen consistently throughout today's sessions. we can see there that senior leaders are less likely to consider resigning, with only 28% of the senior leadership workforce considering resigning in the data we saw last year. And then we next see other staffing roles. So those with the job title of other remaining consistent. So that's 3 years at 39% that we've seen 39% of those with the job title of other considering resigning. Then we see administrative staff. It's important to note that actually administrative staff were the only group within the data set that we saw that increase in the percentage of staff who are considering resigning within the last 3 months when they answer that question. So we see it increasing from 38% up to 40% of administrative staff reporting that they've considered resigning in the past 3 months. Teaching assistants has remained the same, with a decrease in the percentage of middle leaders reporting they've considered resigning from 50% in 2022-2023, decreasing in 23-24 to 49, and now down to 45% considering resigning in 24-25. So we have seen a 5% improvement over the 3 years prior to this year. If we look at teachers, we also see a very similar improvement story, apart from the decreases from 50% in 23-2024 to 46% in 2024 to 2025. So we've seen those improvements for most roles, but the one role that we've seen it worsen slightly is that administrative staff. We include this within our national report. It's quite an interesting split to look at is the regional variation in the risk of resignation. So they range from around 39% of staff considering resigning up in the northwest to 44% considering resigning constantly, often or sometimes, and that's in the southeast. Generally, you can see there the southeast and the southwest have the higher percentages of staff considering resigning compared to teachers up in northern regions, such as the northeast, the northwest, and Yorkshire and Humber having better percentages with only 39, 40, 40%. But again, worth noting that those are still high percentages when we're considering the number of staff that are considering resigning within the last 3 months. So how does this link to those cultural and workload factors? So we asked the question, what are the reasons why you've considered resigning? We looked at this data in the first session, and I did touch on this slightly in that first session, but what we do see is that cultural and workload factors are the main reasons that staff report considering resigning from their roles. So feeling undervalued, feeling overworked, low morale in the workplace, lack of staffing, and pupil behaviour. So of those considering reporting resign, 45% feel undervalued, which is half of that workforce that are considering resigning report that feeling undervalued is one of the main reasons why they do so. Again, 41% feeling with workload, and then our third highest one there, like low morale in the workplace, that's 38% of staff reporting that. But when we have a look at the full picture here, so this is the total list of what has made you report considering resigning, the main drivers of leaving are within a trust's control, and those are the cultural and workload factors that we see there at the top. Towards the bottom of the list, we see those more fixed reasons, such as the physical health reasons, relocation to different areas, retirement, those that are slightly more fixed and out of a trust control, being the less of a reason that has made them consider resigning within those. So we see those areas that are more cultural and more driven through the atmospheres and the experience of staff within those environments being the ones that are more under the trust control. So in our staff experience report, we linked the questions that correlated strongest with risk of resignation. We highlighted these as those key retention drivers. So feeling overworked, stress, appreciation from leadership, how often you feel excited by the work you do, and overall, how well do you feel physically and mentally. We've seen these graphs in the first session today, so apologies if there's some overlap with them, but what I'm actually looking at here are the reasons why considering resigning and the differences within those positions. So we look at those retention drivers, we can see that there are differences within each of these individual roles. So teachers remain the least positive, but that gap is narrowing. If we look at the reasons why they're considering resigning, we are seeing things like overwhelming workload, poor work-life balance, feeling undervalued. We also see points of difference compared to some of those other roles. We see a higher percentage of staff reporting that government policies and attitudes are the reasons why they would consider resigning, dissatisfaction with SLT, or pupil behaviour. So those are some of the more prominent reasons why teachers are reporting that they consider resigning. And what we can actually see is that teachers overall, their well-being of being overworked, stressed, and feeling less well physically and mentally, those are some of the areas where the teaching role are least positive. And we can see that only 35% of the teaching workforce that we've surveyed say that they feel well physically or mentally, very well or quite well. With middle leaders, we see a very similar picture when it comes to the top 3 reasons why they report considering resigning. And the picture is very similar generally for the reasons why they consider resigning. Government policies, again, slightly higher for them compared to other roles, and dissatisfaction with SLT. But what we do actually see for middle leaders is that they're more excited by the work that they do compared to the rest of the workforce. And they're more likely to report feeling appreciated by leadership for the work that they do. And we do actually see that there's an improvement in those areas versus last year. Senior leaders are the most positive. Generally, but in our survey, we generally find that senior leaders report higher levels of positive responses to most of our questions. But actually, what we do see is that they are more likely to report feeling overworked compared to the overall staff body. They're 2% less likely to report that they rarely or never feel overworked. That has improved versus last year with a 3% increase on that one. And we do generally see that the senior leaderships have got even more positive compared to the previous year. So widening that gap with the rest of their staff workforce. The top reasons why they're likely to report feeling considering resigning is overwhelming workload again, poor work-life balance, feeling undervalued. Those. There's been limited change for TAs since last year, but some of the areas where we see that the biggest differences are some of those reasons why they report considering resigning. You can see there that points of difference compared to other roles. Financial reasons are much more likely to play a role in why they've considered resigning. Lack of support, lack of SEND support or resources with certain lack of staffing or family reasons. They're more likely to be reasons why they report consider resigning compared to their colleagues. And we do actually see that they are less likely to report feeling well physically or mentally compared to the whole staffing body, and that has deteriorated versus last year's data. So we can see that only 38% report feeling very well or quite well in our survey data. When we look at admin staff, we're looking at those reasons why, the top reasons why they consider resigning. You can see feeling undervalued, overwhelming workload, low morale in workplaces in there compared to some of the other roles. And where that differs to other roles, we see lack of career progression activities. So in the last session, we talked about this for support staff roles, is the lack of career progression activities being having a strong relationship with risk of resignation, and also the lack of professional development opportunities. One thing that stands out when we look at this data is feeling excited by the work that they do. We can see that that admin staff are 14% less likely to report feeling excited by the work that they do, and that hasn't changed since last year. So that's remained at that lower level compared to the staff body. That is the data that we have for today's session for this one. So I'm going to hand back over to you, Iola.
Thank you very much, Ben. And yeah, I think this paints an interesting picture. And as I said at the beginning, this is kind of the you can stop sharing slides now, I think, so we'll move to conversation. Thank you. Yeah, I think what this really highlights is that sense of it is about belonging, it is about the culture, and it is about the sort of how people feel is the main thing, and it is within the gift of the leaders to work on that. There are some things which are kind of universal challenges. We know, and I think we've mentioned this in some of the sessions already today, we know that workload is a challenge. We know that it's kind of across most of the schools and trusts that take part in an Ajurio survey. It is the area that comes out at the bottom of the staff survey kind of consistently as the area staff are least positive about. But the other things around feeling valued, morale and so on are things that we can work on, and we can work on all of it. But there's a lot to do that kind of focusing on the belonging aspect could have a disproportionate effect on our ability to retain staff. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass over to you, Sufyan. Would you like to tell us about all the great work that you're doing over at Chiltern?
Excellent. How long do I have, Iona? A day, 2 days?
I think if you give us your 13-minute summary of all the great stuff.
So I think what Ben has shared has really been the key that's informed us in how we drive ourselves forward. And I think that's really important to note. The things we thought people wanted and needed compared to the things that people actually wanted and needed were very different. And I know people say about asking surveys, but that element about senior leaders quoting or showing that they're slightly happier in their roles. If I'm surrounded as a MAT director around by senior leaders, and my interaction on a day-to-day basis is typically with head teachers, deputy head teachers, assistant head teachers, I could find myself in a bubble that tells me we are absolutely amazing. And that dangerous cycle meant that we kept thinking, you know what, actually, we're really good at what we do. And what we need to focus on is minor things. And we need to start looking at perks. And we need to start looking at what it means to work for us in terms of discounts. And we looked at various schemes. But then we also thought about the fact that so many of us get discounts on a day-to-day basis, probably from our unions, and we only see the discount after we've spent money on the thing and realize 6 months later, oh my God, I had a discount I could have used there. And it wasn't necessarily what people wanted. When the surveys came back, actually, a lot of the responses were around exactly the elements that Ben shared were well within our control. And yes, we blame lots on the government around pay factors and blah, blah, blah. But actually, this wasn't a factor that was hitting us high. The factor that was hitting us was all within our control. And for us, we focused on how my line manager treats me. And that became an absolute crucial focus for us for the last couple of years. And we realized that actually the most impactful person in any person's work life is their line manager. And the treatment and the experience and the relationship with that line manager is really important. And as an organization that has people coming through the ITT into early careers, and we have 1,500 ECTs that we support through our teaching school, then we recruit people. The one thing we started to realize very quickly was high levels of talent were coming through into the system. Young, high quality, new high quality teachers that are coming from either university or other workplaces into our system. And they're becoming brilliant middle leaders. And their domain expertise in education, in organizations that are high-performing organizations like ourselves, sometimes became confused with leadership expertise. And leadership expertise, in terms of character and the way you treat people, isn't something that's coming through in MPQs. An MPQ does not tell you that it's probably a really good idea to learn the names of the children of staff you're line managing. You don't see that in an MPQ session. But actually, if somebody's calling in sick, it's pretty useful if they're calling in saying my child's unwell. You're able to say, oh, which child? And you're able to then know the name of the children and know, oh, I hope he or she gets well soon. And people started to then, once we started on the journey, people started to tell us about their experiences of line management. And all of them linked back to really personal and pertinent moments in people's lives. Somebody's child being unwell, somebody's parent being unwell, somebody wanting something small, like somebody left one of the best schools in Bedfordshire, and this is a most recent recruitment I did, the best school in Bedfordshire, and they came to a school that we took on, and the school had inadequate across the board in the old framework just before the old framework became redundant, and it got urgent attention across 7 areas in the new framework. And we've taken it on April the 1st, and this person came over, and I was doing the sell of trying to convince them that our school's going to improve. It's on a journey. And I kept thinking to myself, what would make someone come from the highest performing school to the lowest performing school probably in the country at this point in time? What would make them do that? And it all came down to one factor. And it was so surprising that person doesn't have children, but they have 2 cats. And their cat was extremely unwell. And the head teacher did not give them the opportunity to go to the vets at a time that they could find when their cat was really, really unwell. This person has managed a department and made sure everyone in the department got time off and got to sports days and got to assemblies for their children. But when the time came for them getting the same, they didn't have that opportunity for their cat. And what's important to people varies from person to person. What matters to people varies from person to person. It might be children for some, but it doesn't mean that everyone has children. It's different things for different people. And that started our journey around human-centered leadership. Every single person that line manages another person. You could be a site agent that's line managing other site agents. Everyone has to go through our 3-module leadership on how to manage people and what it means to be a human-centered manager and a leader, what it means to care for people, so that when I hear stories, I can say, that's not the Chiltern way. That's not how we treat people around here. But actually, that was pretty hard for me to do when we've never said explicitly how to treat people. We've said very codified way how you teach lessons, codified ways on how you lead management leadership meetings, codified ways of school improvement plans, but we didn't codify what is the basics we expect people when it comes to treating people. And for us, that element has been crucial in both our retention. In the last year, 21 schools. Last year, from 21 schools, this September just gone, we had 5 new starters in schools. Most of them were moved around between our own schools, but 5 new starters that came from outside of the trust. People aren't leaving Chiltern Learning Trust. And that's a lot of that's down to the fact that we're investing in that human-centered element in leadership, especially around their line management. And that's something that's been really important. But then it's about how do we get that message out when it comes to recruitment? And for us, we often talk about the fact that we go out and we turn up to the opening of an envelope. Our last 375 teachers we've recruited, we haven't paid for an advert. 375 teachers. The average sometimes schools are paying is between £500 to £2,000 for adverts for teachers. Even a generous approximate would be that we could have spent well in excess of £500,000. What we did was we turned up to community fairs. We turned up to local mosques, local churches, to the Christmas carols. We turned up to the planting of trees at our local church. We've turned up to work and volunteer on the local canal, turned up to litter picks, turn up where the people are. Because actually the data also shows us that a majority of our people, if we want to retain them, they want to work in communities they feel a part of. Not only in the school, everyone wants a sense of belonging, and Hannah does brilliant work around how to create that sense of belonging in a workplace, irrespective of what your protected characteristics may be, what your differences may be. How do we create that belonging effect? But actually, people want to belong to something bigger than just that office and staff room. They want to belong to a mission. So what is the mission? And Chiltern, we always talk about we're here to make a huge difference, and we turn up when it matters. And we had recently, unfortunately, a school just behind me, we had a triple murder in the community. It affected our school community. What did we do? When it was time for the community, it was an Afro-Caribbean community, and they get together post-funeral for a meal. We hosted it in the school. We paid for it through the school, because it's about turning up when it matters for communities, being there for communities, having this great big building that is shut when it matters for communities. Somebody would say, how does that link with your recruitment? Well, 43 supply teachers worked in that school when we took it on. Not a single supply teacher, and 43 teachers are all local. People, when they see things that you do out in the community, when you turn up, when somebody contacts you, anyone who contacts myself, Adrian, gets the chance to have a coffee with us. We turn up, we have a coffee, we meet people. That could be a junior role, a non-teaching role, a business support role, or it could be a head teacher role. We don't say, well, I'm too big, I'm a director, I'm too big for this one, me. But we'll turn up for a cup of coffee, because meeting people, getting to know people, and understanding that there's real limitations to interview processes and application processes in what you see of people. We've become so obsessed in the sector of pushing people through hoops that sometimes some of the best teachers I know in the system are awful at interviews. Absolutely awful. For how magical they are in the classroom, some people turn up to an interview and they crumble. I'd fancy my chances to interview against Andy Burnham for the Prime Minister's job. That doesn't mean I could do it. Just because I could turn up for the interview doesn't mean I've got the skill to do the job. So this element of not meeting people, not getting out there, that meeting people and the coffees and the time we spend in the community and what we give back means we attract talent that's local. We attract talent that wants to train because they've seen what we do locally. And then they stay because actually you create schools for their families, for their children, for their community, for their neighbors. You create a mission whereby they feel like they're giving back to their community. And in our case, we've ended up transforming the diversity of our staffing body. In some of our schools, for a community like Luton, it's reflective. It's 75% of our staffing body is from the local community, reflecting the local community. But that couldn't have happened if we didn't open our doors and go out, open our doors and let people in. That recruitment has been absolutely priceless for us. So yes, we can't treat in schools the work around community as this amazing give back we do every now and then. We've got to remember it's a real strategic decision that has massive benefits. And then treating people well has massive benefits. I would say the longer our staff stay with us, the more consistency we have with staff that are happy. If our staff are happier, if they stay with us longer, our children get better outcomes. If the staff leave every year, and if they're unhappy but high performing, we get lower outcomes. It's as simple as that. You want to improve your school, make them happy, make them stay, so the kids get a continuous journey with their teachers. Hope that helps, Iona.
That was brilliant, and also brilliant timekeeping. Well done.
That's a
like
first.
You've been a teacher.
That's a first.
Thank you so much. And now we can hand over to Hannah. Hannah is, as discussed, the leader of Belonging Effect. so much of this that Sophia's already touched on has been around that. Hannah works with both with Chiltern, but with loads of other trusts across the country on this topic. So yeah, Hannah, why don't you tell us on top of what we're doing at Chiltern, what else can we be thinking about as ways to drive belonging within the sector?
Sure. Well, I made notes before I came, and I've almost been ticking off the things that have been mentioned already, and which threads I want to pull through as well, because I think it's interesting what Sophia was saying there about being part of the community, because my understanding, Sophia, is you spent most of your career in the same place and you're very embedded in the community, whereas I've bounced around quite a lot for my career. So each time I've moved to a school or moved to a new trust, I've had to start over. So thinking about that sense of community, I wanted everyone listening to think about networking as well, because what I've spent a lot of time doing, as has Sufyan, is building a network around the schools and the trusts I work in. So similar claim to fame, I staffed 2 schools for 3 years and didn't pay for a single advert. And all that money I saved went into an amazing CPD offer. So the staff who got recruited also got really well developed and they got retained. But I couldn't have done that had I not spent 15 years networking, had I not have recruited outward facing staff, who Sophia's now got a couple of them working for him, who like went to events, blogged, spoke about how much they loved our profession, and people wanted to be part of that mission of our 2 startup schools. And I get contacted all the time by head CEOs, chairs of governance bodies, like saying, "Oh, the advert's out, but no one diverse has applied, Hannah. Can you help?" It's like, you should have asked me a year ago. A year ago, I could have helped. A year ago, I could have helped you build a diverse network around your setting. And thinking about the advert and the positioning of the advert, it's too late if the advert's live for us to suddenly diversify who's going to be applying for the jobs. So I think we have to have a longer lens on this. When I'm working with the HR team, the recruitment team, the SLT in a setting, I say, what can we do this summer to influence next spring? And there's things we can do differently internally and externally around our recruitment, but also around our positionality. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And the presentations I caught in the previous session, that amazing CPD offer, it is really costly and it is really timely, but you can save the money from how you recruit and the money goes back into the staff development, and it makes a massive difference. When Ben was talking us through the data, and I've seen some of that data before and in other things we've collaborated on, the lens I'd like everyone to have a think about through that data is not only by what role people hold, but also by what identity people hold, and which staff are telling us they're overworked, which staff are telling us they're underappreciated. Is it the support staff, or is it women who've got children? Is it our younger staff, our older staff? I really think there's a missing story sometimes that we are ignoring, and it's very loud in the data, but we're not looking at it intently enough. So I was just running a session this morning for a group of schools I've been supporting all year, and we're looking at intersectionality and intersectional identity. So thinking about the overlay of identity, where a lot of people are navigating 1, 2, 3 protected characteristics, but are we looking at the data through an intersectional lens and looking at the experience of our female staff, our parenting staff, our staff who are menopausal? That, to me, we don't do as well with the staff data as we do with the pupil data. Reading back to some of the other presentations this morning, the idea of the culture of the spaces we are creating is so important to me. I've been out of headship for 6 years, and in those 6 years, I've spent most of my time training on DEIB, but also coaching. I coach 40 to 50 senior executive leaders each month. I'm not exaggerating how many of my staff who I coach are at burnout, are thinking about leaving the profession, or are in crisis. I had 4 crisis calls on Sunday from leaders of colour working in our sector who are not being looked after by their employer, who don't know how to navigate the system, who haven't got union support, where the HR policies aren't always up to date, available. And I think we've got a duty of care and a responsibility there. And I'm seeing more and more people hit crisis point, and people are recommending them to call me, and I help them navigate the system. And that really alarms me, because we are actually losing brilliant people from the sector because they don't feel looked after. And I think going back to the culture in which we are co-creating and cultivating to enable a sense of belonging, sense of inclusion, a sense of safety. There's a lot of buzzwords out there right now, like psychological safety, courageous conversations. Where's the training to actually embed the behaviours? People are literally saying, go off and have courageous conversations, go and build psychological safety. But people need to be trained on how to do that. They need to understand the concept. It needs to be really intentional, really consistent, but also really strategic. So thinking about how we are upskilling, empowering all the different leaders to have that knowledge, I think is important. And I truly believe that some of these people I'm supporting through coaching, if their line managers had better training, particularly around HR, they wouldn't be in the mess they're currently in. And I didn't get any HR training properly until I was a deputy head. So when I was a deputy head and a head, I made sure that all my SLT got HR training and all of my middle leaders. And we've talked a lot today. Sophie just said like the key factor as to why people leave their job is their relationship with their line manager. And a lot of our middle leaders and some of our senior leaders, dare I say it, do not understand HR policy and practice. They're actually getting us into a bit of a mess because they're giving poor advice. And I think there is a piece of work for everyone on the call to be thinking about today, how you influence the policy into practice and how there needs to be statutory expectations around the training that the staff need to be having when they are line managing other people, so that when there's something around flexible working or something around neuroinclusion or something around menopause, it gets to you, it comes up the ladder and it gets to SLT, it gets to the HR team. Because I do think a lot of line managers in the middle leadership shut it down. And then we don't actually know what the issues are and what's being surfaced. What else have I not mentioned? Around the kind of the belonging piece, like we've been running training in this space now for 6-7 years. And it is interesting how many settings call us in to talk about belonging for the pupils and not belonging for the staff. But if it is belonging for the staff, it's often belonging for the teaching staff and not the support staff. So I went to a trust conference on Friday and they asked me to run our belonging training for the support staff in this 9-school map. And the support staff's feedback was it was the first time they'd felt really valued in the training that they were getting at a trust conference because it was bespoke to them as support staff. And even the language we use around support staff, it really jars me if anyone refers to support staff as non-teaching staff. They are not non-teaching staff. They are support staff. They are operational staff. They are administrative staff. So the inclusive language we use about people, I think, is really important as well. And I think one of the big pieces of work I know a lot of you will be thinking about, as well as the kind of the recruitment and the retention and the development of our staff, is the kind of the talent management pipeline. And I really think we need to be looking at the data point of where the leaky bits are in the pipeline of where we're losing people. We know we lose certain demographics at a certain point of their career. So 3 or 5 years in for ECTs, middle leadership for men of colour, in their 30s for parents, women with children. What are we doing to redress that? And how are we preempting that and being proactive about that is something to really consider. And the staff voice piece, there's a lot of schools, colleges and trusts who rely on the exit interview. And it's just too late. It's too late to be knowing what people are thinking and experiencing as they're leaving. So building in those one-to-ones that some of the trusts talked about earlier on today, it's really time consuming, but it will give us the ear to the ground of what's going on so we can then think about how we can listen and respond. And when Sophie opened with we often overcomplicate it, I think I put in the chat, yes, ask, don't assume. I hear the same all the time, that when we are senior, whether we're senior leaders, executive leaders, we often recreate belonging in the way we need it rather than the way that other people need it. And we often assume what people need when we just need to ask. And sometimes it is the smallest things that people need to be different to help them have that sense of belonging. And I think we can spend a lot of time, a lot of money making something up, but actually just asking and listening and responding. And someone used what I used to say, the kind of the you said we did approach. We used to do a weekly you said we did to show that ongoing feedback loop. So I'll stop there, Iona. There's other things I wanted to say, but I'm sure they'll come out as you ask us both some more questions.
Thank you very much, both of you. And yeah, everyone on the line, please do. You can either put your hand up and get in the queue, or you can type a question into the chat if you would prefer. But yeah, I think what's kind of the theme, and it's interesting as we've gone through the 4 sessions today. There is this sense, I know Jen mentioned it in the second session on listening. She talked about kind of ear to the rails, and Sophie and you spoke about the echo chamber of if you are only asking the people that you see regularly, kind of how are you going to know that you've got the full picture of the the organization. And I think that there is a real challenge here of like the time invested in doing that. So Finn, you said that you'll have a coffee with anyone who wants to have a coffee with you, and I think that's brilliant. One thing I want to put probably to you, Sophie, but maybe to both of you, is how do you balance the different draws on your time for these different things? We've just made the case, I think, quite compellingly that sorting out belonging is one of the best things you could do in order to keep your staff here for longer. So Finn, you said happier staff, longer term staff equals a better education for the children within the schools. But then when you're also being called upon to do a million other things, how do you find the time to carve out these things which might feel nice and they might feel sort of like an add-on? Yeah, Sophie, and you first, and then perhaps Hannah, you've got something to add.
So I think I look at the urgent versus important. The urgent, there will always be things that pull on my time on a daily basis. The important is going back to what makes the most significant difference for the purpose that we exist. Now, we exist to educate children, and therefore I've got to always think about the best way, whatever I allocate my time to, it has the most impact on achieving the best possible experience and outcomes for children from our schools. And therefore, when I'm navigating that urgent versus important, I've got to remember and always place people at the very highest priority. We have 2,000 employees. They're our assets. They are the key behind the success of Chiltern Learning Trust. I'm not doing anyone a favor as someone paid for a job in a central team for meeting up with someone about a career discussion, for meeting up with someone when they want to raise some sort of issue or challenge or grievance they're facing within their workplace. That's not a favor. And I think that's where the whole element is strategically, and I'm a business person at heart, strategically, I've got to place the value, the money that I cost and the time that I allocate. I've got to think, where's the greatest value? And the greatest value every single time is with people. It's with potential people that can work with us. It's people outside in the system that can see how great we are, because all of that has a trickle-down effect of how we attract talent. So when I go out and I'm delivering in conferences, it's actually well thought through, because we want to say, hey, Chiltern are brilliant. We've turned up here with Chiltern are brilliant. I want people to say, I'd love to work for Chiltern. I want to create that hype around Chiltern. But it always comes down to what it is, how you allocate your time to people. And I think what we typically do in education, we say me sitting behind a desk doing a school improvement document and the timetable and this and this and this is far more important than that person who knocked on the door and said, you got a minute, mate. And the day you get that balance wrong and you forget that that was more important, that knock on the door was more important than what I'm doing, you're going to see it doesn't matter how hard you work, you're constantly going to be chasing your tail.
Lovely. Hannah, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to add to it that, I mean, there is a time and energy investment, but it pays itself off. And I didn't start Women Ed 11 years ago, Diverse Ed 7 years ago to recruit a brilliant staff. That was not my intention. That was not my why. But because I have been networking, going to events, blogging, podcasting, speaking about what I care about, people got me and wanted to come and work with me. I then recruited people who are outward facing, who also did the same. And it became a team sport. And I think that's what Sufyan's done with his staff. It was Sufyan doing the heavy lifting at Sufyan and Adrian initially, but they've now recruited very outward-facing staff who are all out there connecting with brilliant people, spreading the mission. And I think for the people on the call, you might be the only person on LinkedIn, or maybe your CEO or your head teachers on LinkedIn. I used to run training in the big MATs I worked in. Every single member of SLT, getting them on LinkedIn, understanding how to use it, encouraging them to get out there, go to events. And I've just put Rend in the chat because Sufyan and the team have founded Rend, the Racial Equity Networking Dinner. I've tried to go to as many of them as possible over the last 5 years to diversify my network. And I think we have to see it as our leadership responsibility wherever we work, and a collective leadership responsibility, that networking is an expectation of what we do. Relationship building beyond our setting is also something, because you never know, like the person who doesn't get the interview this time might apply another time, or might have a friend, going back to the community events Sophie hosts. Like there's a web around our settings that we have to be constantly nurturing and feeding, and those relationships do pay it back in kind, longer term.
Brilliant. And actually, you mentioning the mentioning Rend, as you were speaking, I went on a little journey in my head where I went, oh, and also Rend is the event that I've been to that serves the best food. You go to all these conferences and all these education networking things. If you go to Rend, you're going to leave very, very full and very, very satisfied. And then my brain took me to the next point, which is the thought of food overall as a thing that drives belonging. And I'll just share a story from Big Education, which are based in Southeast London. They're in an area with quite a broad demographic, and some reasonably high degrees of disadvantage in some of their schools. And they have introduced this thing. It was built for parents. It was built as a kind of way of driving belonging among the parent community. But it was, if I remember correctly, I'm not sure if anyone's from Bigs on the Line, and correct me if I get any details wrong. But they basically said, kind of bring your favorite food. And it was a sort of shared dinner, and that meant you had all kinds of cuisines from all over the world. And that was a kind of it was a way of people having a potluck dinner. It was a way of having a sort of a nice meal, but also of a way of connecting and sharing stories and getting to know each other better, and getting to know people who are haven't had the same experiences as them growing up, or historically, and so on. And I think there is something around this the potluck dinner. They provided the venue. They had it in one of their schools, which meant the lights were on for another few hours. It meant there was some kind of staffing required to do that, but then it really took care of itself, and it wasn't a particularly high cost activity, but the impact of that was relationships, and was understanding of each other, and of much higher senses of belonging. And I think as we think about belonging as a concept, it is the whole community. Sufyan's spoken a lot about going out into the community, but I know we're focused on the staff thing for today. This is the people power event, but I did think it was worth a quick detour into thinking about the wider community as well.
Can I add something, Iona, because it comes up a lot in our DIB training around the staff socials that schools, trusts offer, and how they haven't necessarily evolved with how diverse the UK is now. And a tension that comes up in a lot of the spaces I'm supporting is the Christmas do. Well, not everyone in their workplace celebrates Christmas, firstly, so that's already a barrier. It's in a space serving alcohol, that's a barrier. The price point of the event, that's a barrier. And I think we really need to think differently and unlearn and relearn how to bring people together. And that idea of community gatherings within the school hall with a potluck, it's so much more accessible, it's so much more inclusive. And like I talk a lot about, like, how do we design inclusion and belonging into the event or into the process? We often do it and then wonder why people don't come, or wonder why people are voting with their feet. And I think that example of the Christmas do or the staff social is something we need to really unpack, because it doesn't necessarily work in its current format or its traditional format.
Yeah, and with that, this is something we're doing within Ajurio, the power of kind of problem solving. I think I look after our kind of, when the England team gets together, and for a long time I just sort of booked somewhere and said, actually, us being together is the purpose. We're not going to have an agenda. We'll just get together, we'll share food, and we'll talk. And over time, we've sort of said, actually, no, let's make these more meaningful. Let's make these more purposeful, and coming together around a shared challenge and a shared kind of topic of conversation. It's work, but it's slightly more engaging than your sort of day to day, and it's also kind of giving you that sort of focus for people who maybe sort of general socializing is not their kind of way of having fun.
And we've got Chai and Chat that takes place in Luton, and again, anyone can pop in for a Chai and Chat. We have our children's petting farm that we book for maternity, paternity, so parents can come along after school with their children. Those in maternity can come, on paternity leave can come and join us again to just regroup, meet other people that they work with in a fun social environment. We have Luton Ed, which again takes place in a jazz club in the evening. It's after 7, and you might have a couple of people speak for 15 minutes each. We make sure that it's not something dense and boring, but people can have snacks, pizza, drinks, and enjoy the evening. Creating those moments. And sometimes I think one of the things that we are starting to do more of, especially in our teaching school part around professional development, loads of people turn up to professional development opportunities around the country, and the thing that they say they love most was if the food was good and if they got to network with people. So my point to my team was, let's just create opportunities for great networking and great food. Like, that's okay. If we could strip out the fact that we have to call them for this and say, we've got to talk to you through 90 slides of PowerPoint because that's the only reason we're going to feed you. Why not? Why not? Every time today, I've just got a really good curry and rice and everything dropped off to me in my office because we've got an inclusion conference downstairs. But for me, it was about making sure the food is great so that people enjoy lunchtime, make sure it's an hour so people have enough time to network and talk. Breakout sessions, just allow them to network because that's what people love doing. Give people the opportunities to talk to people during the working day, create opportunities in a career that is so time consuming and absorbing that people find it really hard to go out and make friends outside and blah, blah, blah. Create opportunities like we used to have traditionally in this country where different occupations had their own kind of social clubs and so on. Create those social environments in different ways that are more inclusive but allow people to feel a part of something.
Absolutely. We're heading towards the end of the session, so I'm going to ask both Sufyan and Hannah if you've got any final reflections, and then I'll move to wrapping up the session as a whole. Sufyan, as I can see you, do you want to go first?
I would just say investing in your people and your people being happy. And as a business studies teacher, the one thing you learn in motivation theory, and when they're talking about kind of Taylor's approach to motivation, and Mayo's approach to motivation, McGregor's, Maslow's, the one thing every one of those theories you realize at the end of it all is when people are happy, people are productive. That's the one thing we've learned in industry. If people are happy, if they're working in an environment where the settings are nice and the environment's been taken care of, and if they feel like that they can self-actualize and belong in something and they're a part of something, people will produce amazing things. So invest in your people, invest in creating an environment where people belong, invest in creating opportunities where people can have laughter and joy at work, because you will get the very best outcomes for your children. You will save a huge amount of money because you'll retain them and you won't have to spend on recruiting new people, training new people. And when they've stayed with you, children will get a better experience. Their parents and communities will get a better experience because of the continuity you create in your schools.
Thanks. And Hannah?
Well, I'll bounce it by saying the money you save for retaining people from the recruitment side of stuff, it does get tight because your staff become very expensive. And I think one of the problems that some of my schools, colleges and trusts are facing is they've got really high belonging and really high retention, but they've got a very expensive staff. So it's then thinking about how we deploy the staff who are UPS, who are really experienced, and we need to be a bit more creative about like their stretch and their challenge and the opportunities that they can harness. I'm working with so many global majority educators who are desperate to lead on teaching and learning, but they're not being deployed by their teaching school hub to be mentors and facilitators. Like, I really think we need to think about more strategically the opportunities that are there. Because I think the other thing we haven't necessarily talked about is the fact that with tighter budgets in the sector, we're seeing SLT shrinking and we're seeing people not being replaced. So we've got more and more people hitting their heads against the glass and concrete ceilings. So we have to think creatively about how to give them diagonal and horizontal opportunities within our trusts to be developed and to be used, because otherwise they'll get bored and they'll get frustrated. So I think that's just another thing for us to be thinking about. It's how many opportunities are we providing, which might not be extra money, but could be extra time or extra responsibility or extra exposure. And I think we need to think differently about that piece longer term as well.
Brilliant. I feel like that could be another hour session just on that question alone. Yeah, thank you both of you, and thank you, Ben, for the data. This has been, I think, again, a really interesting session for me. I hope for everyone on the line it's been really interesting and thought-provoking, and you've left with some ideas of kind of practical things that you could be thinking about to drive belonging and use that as your superpower when it comes to retention. I'll draw a close on session 4 now, and then I'll briefly do a wrap up on the day as a whole. So thanks everybody that has spent the day with us. Thank you so much to all of the speakers. I think one of the threads that I don't think we deliberate. I'll check with Danny, who's kind of orchestrated the day. I think this was an accidental thread that's woven through the day rather than something deliberate, but something that's really stood out in every session has been this sense of the more we can do to close the gap between what we're doing as leaders and what we're doing in the kind of those focused on the strategy and the sort of how we do things as an organization, and those that are delivering it day to day, the closer we can come to the people who are kind of making the school what it is, the better. And I've really enjoyed thinking about there was a slide in the previous session that had that sort of what kind leadership looks like, and I think I'm gonna take this as a sort of thing that I weave through my practice as well, and thinking about this isn't just about being nice and smiley. This is about being kind and being really, really effective for the people that you are taking care of. So with that, I think we can close the day. Yeah, as I say, I've really enjoyed being part of this. I'm going to look forward to this time next year when we do it all again. Thanks, everyone.